So while Sarah's getting mic'd up and getting her slides up, I wanted to just take this opportunity because I think a theme that we keep hearing from all the speakers throughout the night is everybody's just one bill away, yes. Right? Everybody's just one step away. And I heard something on the news this week that I thought was very impactful that maybe before I got involved with this organization, I may not have thought twice about. And that was, they were talking about the electricity bills and the gas bills right now, right? So huge cold strip that we've had in the last, 3 weeks in a row where it's been sub-zero temperature. And so the gas and electricity is being used at super high levels. So now think of yourself, if you're a single mom and you're barely making it, you're spending 80% of your income on your housing. And now all of a sudden you get a $600 gas and electricity bill. You're one bill away from being homeless. So just something that I thought of that I think is a new, and we have our new update of our donations. Right now we are at $86,209. You're out there tonight, freezing in the cold, shivering, do some Facebook Lives. Ask for some more donations because we'll take the donations all night until tomorrow morning when we wrap up the donations.
We'll take the donations till mid-March.
Oh, we'll take the donations till mid-March. So you want to reenact this in your driveway next week? More pity money? We'll take the pity money. So, but anyway, that's just something to think about. Just when you see some of those things, think of the repercussions for people that may not be in as good a financial situation. That it could lead to literally just this cold streak could lead to more people being homeless. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, in a second, I'm going to stall for one more second while Sarah gets mic'd up.
Yes, yes.
You do need a mic.
For the Facebook.
It's for the Facebook. You don't need one for this room, Sarah, but you need one for the Facebook. So Sara Runyon is our Chief Operating Officer, and she is going to present on effective tools for ending homelessness. She also heads up the outreach team. So the wonderful group that was the first panel that you guys saw, they are under Sarah's leadership. So if you've got additional questions about that, I'm sure she'd be able to answer those as well. I'm stalling.
Have you checked out the snacks?
Yeah, the snacks are great. Okay, and you're Sarah.
I am. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me. So I think you guys probably know, if you've seen me speak before, that I love my big, bold, like numbers. Like we did 50,000 services this year. I'm not doing that this year. I've changed it around just a little bit. If you hate it, too bad. I'll work it out for next year. So this year has been terrible. It's been terrible in a lot of ways, right? It's been stressful. I have wanted to go out and kick rocks. I've been wanted to pull my hair out. I've wanted to be swaddled. I mean, that is basically how this year has went. And I think it really required us to use every tool, trick, tip, practice in our toolbox for ending homelessness this year because of the unique circumstances around the pandemic. And so I think one of the things that's great about us is that we can't really just afford to say, like, because of COVID, we're not going to do this. You know, we say because of COVID, this is what we're going to do now, and this is what we should be doing. And that is our approach. And that is why we are a leader in this field. And that is why we are innovative and adaptable in these kinds of circumstances. The adaptability isn't just our agency, right? It's on a micro scale, it's on a macro scale. When you make changes, systemic changes to a process or a system of ending homelessness, like we have had to this year, it requires the city, it requires the continuum of care, it requires our individual workers, it requires our agency as a whole. And I think when I was doing this, I was thinking so hard about all the things that we actually did this year, because I do like my data and I like my big numbers, and they're thrilling to me and they're exciting. but you're really jumping the gun there, bud. You're all right. Okay, that's fine though. What I wanted to say was that this year, when I was doing my presentation, has really what dawned on me is, and I changed my whole presentation this morning. I had a kind of presentation put together that was snazzy and data filled, and I literally had a moment of clarity, and I realized that this year has not necessarily been about ending homelessness. It has literally been about, there you go, saving lives. There it is. I think for the folks that have the passion that we have and work tirelessly to end homelessness, you start realizing that a year like this, that the goal really is to get people in housing, literally to save their life. And so I think that even though I like to show my big numbers, I'm scaling it down this year a little bit, and I'm going to talk about small numbers, and I'm going to talk about some of the impacts on how we've had to change our processes in the community to save lives, because just one life matters, right? And so you can provide 50,000 services, but even just the one life matters. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today is not just the effective tools for ending homelessness, but what it means to be saving lives in what we do every day is doing that. Okay, so I put some numbers in here. I fooled you. Whatever. You know I'm going to do it. Stop it. Stop it. 430. That is the number of people we housed this year. And love it. Thanks. This number looks entirely different to me this year than it did last year when I put up our house number for the year. That is the number of lives we could have saved. That is how I have looked at this whole entire year. And when you start looking at it from that perspective, that is an amazing number. It's much more amazing than I thought it was last year. So I think that it's just important to keep that in mind. Go ahead. Okay, I know. I got more numbers. I told you I was kidding. 46,000. That is the number of services we provided this year. It is 50% more than we provided last year. And that is with having to totally alter the way that we provide services in nearly every single way, from engagement all the way to the end to housing. I'm going to get into that, but that's also an amazing number. Okay, right? $404,000. I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but this is something that we did this year. We helped facilitate providing $404,000 to households that were at risk of homelessness and housing unstable due to the pandemic. We did it in like 3 or 4 months, and it was over 300 households. That is not something we usually do. How we worked all that out, I don't know. It's probably just because we're awesome. You all know this. But yeah, so not just ending homelessness, but helping prevent it is something that we also had to really try hard to do this year.
That's working upstream.
It
right?
is. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Sometimes I forget what all my big numbers mean.
Meals.
I was going to say, except I know what this one is. It's meals. Meals. We provided 19,000 meals this year. And I'm talking probably not even through the entire year, maybe what, 7 months, Kristen? Yeah, it wasn't 7 months or so. Do you know the kind of stress that providing a meal, when that's not something that you normally do, puts on your staff? When you're trying to save lives and end homelessness, and you have individuals who are not eating because they can't get to the grocery store, and when they go, there's not food there. And so we had to go get it. We had to buy packaging to basically keep it warm while we were delivering it. We had a number of people. We had multiple sites we were delivering to, all of our properties. We were delivering it to individuals who were experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So I guess on top of our normal business operations, which is housing 430 people and providing 46,000 services, providing the rent assistance and providing 19,000 meals on top of what we do every day already is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. It speaks to our staff and how great they are and how willing they are just to do what is necessary to help people just be surviving. Okay, the system. So I like to talk a lot about effective evidence-based practice. And since I'm going to talk a little bit more about kind of how we save lives, I just want to talk about how the pandemic affected like the whole cycle of what we do. Homelessness, just homelessness alone this year looked crazy different than it ever has. Shelters are trying to deconcentrate. People can't go to the library anymore. People can't use the bathroom at the library anymore. They can't get around to get food. There were a number of issues that happened just in the way homelessness looked that started to contribute to some unsheltered homelessness as well. Engagement. Every time we went out, we had to provide masks. We had to gear up. We had to stay farther away from people. Building rapport under those circumstances is not particularly easy. And so just the way we engage, the manner which a lot of telephone engagement as well, which is not, you know, always a lovely way to do things when you're trying to build trust and rapport. Assessments. Assessments are so important to being able to know what people's needs are, what their barriers are, and what kind of housing they need to live in. So evidence-based tools just give you the basis for kind of knowing all of these things. Case management. It's troubling. It was a troubling year for case management because it was so damn hard. It was just so hard to provide case management when you are geared up. You can't get close to individuals. You're not necessarily allowing visitors at your property, so people can't just walk in anymore. So the outreach team was actually doing assessments on the street in front of our building when it's freezing cold. Because we couldn't, some of our big apartment buildings where our offices are house very vulnerable people. And so we had to limit visitors to those buildings. It totally changed the way we provided case management. Can't walk into Social Security anymore and get help with a claim. Can't go to the driver's license facility and go in there and try to get a driver's license. Everything was so freaking difficult. So I think just the kind of stress and pressure that the pandemic put just on the system and individuals as a whole is really noteworthy. And then housing. We housed a little bit less people this year, but part of it is because people didn't leave. They stayed where they were at. And so there weren't very many housing units available. 430 is still a lot of people, but housing became really constricted. Chris talked about this a little bit too, which is the fact that when you have the moratorium going where people can get evicted, you really limit the turnover in units and your ability to locate a unit to put people in. And so housing individuals started to become very difficult. So one of the things I really wanted to focus on was assessments, because if you think about saving lives, the regular pre-COVID assessment for homelessness, assessing individuals, is about saving lives. It already is about that. It's called the VI SPDAT. The VI SPDAT screens things like criminal history. Do you owe people on the street money? Have you been to the hospital recently? Have you been victimized? It goes through a whole list of things to determine what your vulnerability is. And so we already are focused on saving lives in our regular assessment. What we had to do early on with COVID, and we did this really quickly, we put together a like an additional screening that included COVID vulnerability. And so I don't have time to go through the whole system, but the vulnerability screening is really important because the higher the number, that person with the highest number, most vulnerable, is who goes into the next opening, right? And so we added a COVID screening on there to determine vulnerability due to, you know, a bunch of different kind of medical conditions: diabetes, heart disease, lung issues, breathing issues, things that would make them very vulnerable to COVID. And so we added that screening on really early in the process, probably a lot earlier than most people did in the state. And we're able to screen individuals and add that screening in so that those individuals who are most susceptible to COVID were getting into housing sooner. As a result of the screening, we worked in partnership with a handful of agencies to use a local hotel as housing for individuals who were vulnerable, exposed, symptomatic, had pre-existing conditions, and or were coming out of the hospital who weren't contagious anymore and were able to convalesce, so to speak, at the hotel. And so that also, takes a lot of time. Really, so what happens is you do the pre-screening. We made a referral. We built relationships with Heartland. So Heartland took our referral, Heartland Healthcare, and a doctor there made a decision about whether an individual would go into the hotel. And then when they went into the hotel, Phoenix CDS provided them case management. And a doctor came and visited them every day and checked on their status. And we had to pull together resources like all kinds of clothing, food, because people couldn't leave that unit, because most of the time they could be exposing people or themselves. And so, the one thing that when you're talking about these things is you miss these little stories. And that was why it was lovely to have outreach on earlier on the panel, because there was an individual we put in the hotel really early on, first couple people who literally had to, one of our outreach workers who has some training in this field, by the way, I don't encourage our outreach workers to do this, had an individual go into the hotel whose socks could hardly peel off of his feet. And so they're peeling the socks off of his feet, and they're providing him they're washing his feet for him. Even Kristen, I called Kristen. I'm like, Kristen, this guy needs a shower seat. He can't stand up in the shower. He needs to be able to take a shower. He needs to be able to wash his feet. Friday at this always happens at Friday at 4:45, where I'm like, Kristen, find me a shower seat. She's a miracle worker because she will work out a resource in 35 seconds. But
And there's an example of use of unrestricted donor funds.
yes. Foot powder, new socks, cleaning his feet. This guy was extremely close. I mean, probably days to losing some toes. So you're not talking about just saving lives is kind of the big, dramatic thing, but we're talking about people who are losing their little appendages, because they are unable to get the resources to clean, the hygiene resources, basically, especially when things like the library are closed and they don't have access to those bathrooms and restrooms anymore. And so those were the kinds of things that our outreach workers were exposed to this year, which is a little, these things happen all the time, right? I mean, I know people, there's been a lot of socks peeled off with a lot of ugly things underneath over the years, no doubt, but this year was very different in the way that we had to treat and the urgency with which we had to treat some of these conditions on the street. So unsheltered homelessness in general, I didn't really anticipate going into unsheltered homelessness at all this year, but this morning when I was really thinking about saving lives, I was thinking that unsheltered homelessness this year was kind of a big thing in the news. And so if anybody pays attention to homelessness, you would be seeing some stuff going on about the I-74 encampment and some unsheltered homelessness. So this is not news to Phoenix. This is what we do all the time. Unsheltered homelessness is just part of it. Unsheltered homelessness has not gone up this year. I'll tell you that. It definitely has not. What has happened is all of a sudden you have a visual manifestation of unsheltered homelessness through the encampment. And now people are something about it, but it's something that we deal with all the time. This encampment did start to gain a little bit of notoriety, and we started getting a bunch of calls from the city because they were getting donations. We were case managing them almost on a daily basis. OSF had a street outreach team that had doctors and nurses that went out with us. Joel was doing harm reduction and substance abuse stuff, distributing Narcan and things like that. And so that encampment really grew, but part of the problem with that encampment was just that the shelters at the same time are trying to deconcentrate. And so when the city, at really no fault of their own, is saying, why is everybody starting to why am I seeing this? Basically, they're like, get them in the shelter. And the CDC is saying, that is the worst thing you can do right now, is to relocate unsheltered people into the shelters. You're bringing a huge risk into the shelters by bringing those folks in there. And so we had to get very innovative, do a lot of research, talk to other communities and agencies about what they were doing to address these problems. And we ultimately came to the conclusion that we were going to put the individuals at the encampment in a hotel. And while this is not a favorable option to everybody, for a number of reasons, I'm sure, this saved lives. This saved lives. There were people at that encampment who were being victimized. There were fires being set. Citizens were taking donations down there, sometimes when they probably necessarily shouldn't have been. It really was becoming a situation that was also very unhealthy and unsafe physically and medically for a lot of the individuals there. And there were a lot of instances where we've used Narcan this year on individuals who are overdosing. We do CPR. I think there was a situation where an individual was having a seizure down there, had to call an ambulance. Doing street outreach to an encampment like that is literally saving lives possibly every day, especially when it's cold, because individuals are having frostbite. There's been a lot of individuals we've put into housing in the last few years, especially after a cold period like this, who are suffering from frostbite. So that is a real legit concern for folks living on the street, for sure. This hotel for unsheltered individuals is still going on. It's been going on since December 28th. And in the first week, we housed 55% of the people from that encampment in 1 week out of that hotel into permanent housing. That is hard. That is some hard work. Outreach team that you saw earlier, they literally they moved everybody from the encampment in 1 day. In 1 day, 19 individuals from the encampment into a hotel in 1 day. And then our staff actually was at the hotel to provide case management and some oversight for the hotel, because it made it feel a little bit better to have some people on site to provide the resources for them. So we had to staff it first and second shift, which has put a pretty big strain on our staff because they're already working, doing this all day long. And now we're like, oh, can you work second shift tonight? Darcy, please. So yeah, so it has been really hard. I don't know what else to say. It's been hard, and it's been taxing, it's been stressful, but lives are being saved because of that. And that might not seem, putting people in a hotel or changing your vulnerability screening might not seem like much to you. That is innovation in the homeless world. The ability to pull off changing a vulnerability screening for a whole community and every provider who puts names on a coordinated community list is very difficult. And so some of these changes don't seem like a big deal, but they're saving lives and they're demonstrating extreme adaptability, leadership, and
Creativity.
boom, nailed it. Nailed it.
Dedication to the mission.
I thank you. And so the hotel for severe weather, we expanded on that hotel program in the last 2 weeks and have put individuals who are unsheltered into the hotel because of the freezing temperatures. Now that will end soon. That was a really short-term period of time, but that saved lives. That saved lives. You're talking about folks who were on the street when it would have been negative 10 degrees. That is saving lives. Go ahead. Okay, one last story. So I think we are very adaptable, and we are always researching and trying to figure out what the best way to do things are. But coming back to the saving lives, it's not always through a practice that you save a life, right? It's through a passion and a concern. So we had an individual at Veterans Haven who, that's one of our a transitional veteran program, who drank a lot, an awful lot on a daily basis, and he'd be found wandering. And one day I was over there, just happened to be over there, and he was passed out. It was like 10 degrees on the ground, covered in a lot of stuff, bodily fluids and stuff. And another resident, myself, helped him and get him into his room and stuff, called an ambulance just to make sure he was okay. A night later, he's missing again. And the staff called me, and they're like, what do you think? He can't go very far. You know, he's not well. He was drunk. I said, lock up the door. Just make sure all the doors are locked, but just take one little quick lap around. And I don't mean around the block necessarily, because it's nighttime and it's cold. I mean, just kind of around the building. Because these workers at Veteran Haven are very concerned for those individuals. He's like, I don't know what to do. Should I do a missing person report? I'm like, no, just take a walk around. This individual is lying in the middle of the alley, passed out, and it was 10 degrees. He could have gotten run over. That's what I'm saying about our staff, though. It's not just about the policies and practices you put in place. It's about the concern. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, I'm really worried about him. Take a look for him real quick. He did. He went out and took a look for him, found him laying in the alley, 10 degrees, passed out. Could have got hit by a car. These are the kinds of things our workers deal with on a daily basis. Saving lives is a real thing. Sometimes it's just being smart enough and building good enough rapport with individuals to know that I haven't seen so-and-so in 2 days. Usually he comes and gets his check if we're his payee or something. Haven't seen him for a couple days. Let's go check on him. And sometimes you do encounter a medical emergency. People having a stroke or having a heart attack. People pass away. It's just part of it. And so I think just the continued diligence and passion of our staff, but also our ability to use the evidence-based effective tools to ending homelessness is also contributing to the saving lives. And seeing people here at this event is really, I'm not really a crier, but it makes me a little something, because it's really hard work. And to know that other people are supporting and contributing to that cause in just the ways they can, not necessarily in the ways we do, but in the ways that you can, it's very motivating to staff. It's very motivating to me to get up in the morning and know that the community and individuals are supporting our cause and are with us in this. So I thank you very much.
Howie, we haven't talked about Howie at all.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm not mic'd up though, so.
See, I can hear you just fine.
Okay. So we have been working for months and months now. We partner with United Way and are bringing a mobile hygiene vehicle to the community. It's actually here. Our hope was to have it here tonight so you could all tour it and check it out. It's not quite ready to take out on the road yet, but we basically have a box truck equipped with a wheelchair lift, a complete accessible restroom, and a regular restroom, and 2 washers and dryers, completely self-contained, that our outreach team will have out on the streets to help people take care of their hygiene needs. And we're super excited about that. Like I said, we wanted to have it here, and we're a couple weeks from that, but.
Excellent, thank you. I am like, so this is not my normal presentation, so it feels a little disjointed to me. I was telling Jennifer earlier that it's like I'm like a yard full of feathers today. That's what one of my friends says to me all the time. But do you guys have any questions? I mean, you're just in agreement. We're pretty awesome. We save lives.
What do you need from the city?
Oh, man.
That $5 million check.
Nailed it.
Even if you don't get that amount, what do you need on a daily basis? A dedicated effort from the city, what do you need? And I'm talking about City Hall, the elected government.
Hey, turn that camera off. Stop it. Stop it. I can't do that right now. The city has been pretty supportive. I'm sure. City's been pretty supportive. I mean, I think one thing that could benefit the city and our homeless individuals would probably to really think hard about having a mental health or homeless liaison on the police force. That would probably be pretty useful because a lot of individuals, and they have made some efforts. We have done some presentations for them at the rookie school for their new hires at the police department, city inspectors, and some other presentations to city staff about the kinds of issues they're going to encounter and how to deal with them. But you can't solve all those problems in the middle of the night and second shift when they really need you sometimes. And so that would probably benefit them. I think supporting affordable housing that's kind of the big thing, right? But they're generally willing to just sit at the table and hear what we have to say. And, you know, I would have never thought last year we would ever have the hotel program. That was a city thing. And so just them having done that this year is pretty amazing. I mean, I hope it's something that they think about how well it went and how many people we housed and got off the street, and, you know, they think more about those kinds of programs in the future.
Sarah, I think too, just to add to that real quick, I think another thing that we can do just as individuals who are now more knowledgeable about what's happening is talk to our neighbors and our friends, right? One of the biggest issues we have is the not in my backyard. And so when we're at those cookouts, when we're able to, when we're at those cookouts and those parties and those whatever, right? And people are around and people start saying things like, oh yeah, did you hear that they're gonna try to build this low income housing down the road? Speak up and say, good, right? Like we need that in this community rather than just staying silent. So I think that's a big way that we can also work to help
And it's
support.
called affordable housing.
Exactly.
Do you have something else back there, Jennifer?
And I just shot from my mask anytime I want to say it. No, there is actually one more thing. What would you say that we can do besides raising money here tonight? What would you tell us that are tangible things that we can do in this room?
I have one very quickly.
Yeah.
We weren't able to talk about it. Sarah just made some references to the fact that our existing pool of consumers, you know, and the challenges that they have faced. It's easy to talk about and see the ones that are on the street. The ones who live in our housing, we need to keep in mind, we're all tired of being shut in. We're all tired of being shut in. They are really tired of being shut in. You know, we take a lot of pride in the fact that, you know, we are a year into a pandemic. We work with one of the most vulnerable populations out there and have had only one consumer positive for COVID. Okay, and that is because of the precautions that they're willing to abide by. And that is rough on them. You know, many of our consumers have very serious mental illnesses that they have battled for their whole life. And I mean, I have one who's lived with us, you know, for more than 20 years. And he said, Chris, all you've ever said for my depression is to get out. Now you're telling me I have to stay in, you know? And so think about that, you know, things that they would use to treat their, you know, being healthy and managing their own mental illness. Those tools were taken away from them because of a pandemic and stuff. And so having said that, we are constantly looking for things that will help them be entertained when they live by themselves and are shut in. Coloring books, puzzle books, things like that. I know it sounds so simple, and very early in, you know, the COVID pandemic, we had a lot of people dropping those things off for us, ordering them for Amazon, and it's kind of filtered off. We don't know when the pandemic's going to end, you know, and be able to open up meaningful for the people that live in our programs. So just think through things like that, that it's like, okay, if you're having trouble entertaining yourself in your own home, you know, what would help you? And those kinds of things are a very tangible thing that we can put in the hands of people who live in our programs now.
And you know, that really is part of what I wanted to talk about with case management too, is just how we had to modify services. And part of it was that, not just like puzzles and coloring books, but like fun quizzes about job readiness. Things they could do that were like games and puzzles, but they were also really skill building. So we had to do a lot of that. Paper copies where people were filling out like an employment quiz, you know, what's the right answer? How should you dress when, you know, go to a job interview? And then give prizes for that at the end of the week. And so we had to get really creative with finding things that were also educational for the consumers as well as fun.
And I should point out, the majority of them do not have TVs. So you also have to keep that in mind, right? How many of us are relying on TVs and other forms of media to keep us entertained? Most of them do not have that. And so again, you know, any creative things you can provide that help them continue to be safe and willing to stay in their apartments would be a big help.
Thank you, everybody.
The programming part of the evening. So thank you so much for coming in and being interested and participating with our speakers tonight. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So we should have pizzas delivered anytime now, I
Yeah.
think. So pizzas will be showing up anytime. There's Jimmy John's in the fridge. There's lots of snacks back there, coffee, hot chocolate. We can do hot tea. Please help yourself to everything. At 10 o'clock.